What's going on, DGen Nation? Back with another video. In my first video, I broke down my BBM3 final team. Today, I'm going to break down my team that made the final in the Pomeranian 3. So the final was a 278-person final, and I did not do nearly as well as I did in BBM. I finished 127 out of 278, so pretty much middle of the pack. Let's look at the build for that team. It was a 2-5-8-3, same as my BBM3 final team. And I started this draft the same way I started the BBM3 final team, going running back, running back. So I'm going to do a little breakdown of this team as well, what I did good, what I did bad, what can I do to adjust for this upcoming season, what my takeaways, all of that. So there's so many best ball channels out there, and each one's going to offer something unique. There's a little something that you could take away from each of them. Sometimes you have to browse around a little bit to find your niche, find something that you like, something that you can learn from. You have like the comedy people like Peter Overzet who are great at what they do, and there's a variety of different things. Chris Spags is another one that's absolutely hilarious. But I'm gonna try and the one thing I'm going to try and do is bring transparency. I think a lot of people don't show receipts. They don't point out the things that they did wrong. They'll point out the good, but they won't point out the bad. They won't admit their mistakes. They won't show receipts. So that's what I'm trying to do with these teams. I'm not perfect. I fared well in Best Ball Mania, but those things can be luck as much as they are skill. I think BBM, like a tournament like BBM, requires much more skill than, let's say, a Superflex. Like I made the finals in the Pomeranian Superflex, but I just not Superflex isn't as sharp of a field. There's not a strategy that you can really nail down. It's getting one of those elite quarterbacks is so important, and there's just it's so many variables in that add up to it being more of a game of luck than a game of skill. But I do think these 18 round drafts, you have to be sharp and you have to know what you're doing in order to get the best out of your teams. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do a breakdown here of this Pomeranian 3 team, and let's get into it. So quarterback, we have Daniel Jones and Jalen Hurts. Hurts obviously was phenomenal last year, but this is the week 17 totals, and you can see that Daniel Jones had a monster game, 36.18 points. And this is why I love doing 2 quarterback builds. I don't love going 3 quarterbacks, and the only time I would do that is if I'm not taking a quarterback until, taking my first quarterback round 10, 11 in the, I'll take 3 at the end to try and see if I can patch together a decent quarterback room. But I love getting one of the elites, and Hurts was one of the elites, and you were getting him in the 6th round. So that was massive. But then I took a shot on a guy like Daniel Jones, who a lot of people had written off. A lot of people thought he could not be out of the league, but he was destined to be a career backup and lose his starting job. But in saying that, I did take the shot on him because he had Joe Judge as a coach. And if you have Joe Judge as a coach, especially as a quarterback, I can't blame you for anything that you do on the field, because the guy is just completely incompetent and doesn't even deserve to be a coach at all, never mind a head coach leading a franchise. So I think a lot of those Daniel Jones rough years were a direct correlation to the coaching. And the fact that Dayball was able to come in was monumental for his progress. Not that he was the greatest passer in the world, but he was efficient. He wasn't turning the ball over, and he was using his legs, which is his best asset. So That was huge, especially with Hurts. You see the O next to his name. He was out week 17. He missed a few weeks there at the end, which really hurt. But Jones made up for it. I don't think you could have expected a better game than that out of Hurts, even if he was healthy. So, quarterback's very solid. Move on to the running backs again. DeAndre Swift. Had DeAndre Swift on my BBM 3 final team. In this draft, I got him in the second round. I took Derrick Henry in the first, but another running back start, which, as I said before, a lot of people will say that's not ideal. A lot of people will tell you that that's a mistake. And honestly, I'm not saying it's not a mistake. You don't enter these tournaments to finish 127th. You enter these tournaments to win it and finish first. So, if you're measuring the overall success, was it profitable? Yes, but that's not the end goal. I want to win one of these. You want to win that life-changing money. So, in that regard, I think there are things that I could tweak about my strategy. Not that I didn't go, I had some drafts where I was pissing yellow and I was going receiver. I had plenty of those, but I can only go by the teams that made the finals. If there was one of those, I'd be happy to show it. But the teams that I made the finals with, I started running back. So, Henry first round, Swift, and I'll pull up the draft board in a minute. I just kind of wanted to do a quick rundown, each positionally, but Henry in the first, Swift in the second, Damian Pierce, phenomenal value for where I got him, was excellent. Singletary and Brian Robinson, all very solid running backs. But as you can see, I mean, if we go back up here, Hurts out, Singletary out, Pierce out, Derrick Henry out. So that's a good chunk of my team that was out and missed week 17. So I advanced, but going in, I didn't feel great about it because, you get that many studs hurt. It's never a good recipe, and that's where the luck factor comes in. That's where are my guys healthy? Do I have the right pieces? Are they going to be healthy in week 17? So, that's something that you just can't control. You could nail it in the draft, but injuries can snatch that away from you real quick. So, scroll down to receiver. So my first receiver off the board was Keenan Allen, and that's where you can definitely question some of the running back picks. Like, having Keenan Allen as your one. I mean, if he was Keenan Allen from 2, 3, 4 years ago, yeah, that's not bad. But he's just a guy who gets dinged up a lot. He's injury prone, and it wasn't just nicked up this year. It was hurt, injured, and he missed a significant chunk of the season. And you just can't have that as your wide receiver one. Wide receiver 2 was Deontay, and another guy I took early, and just did not live up to what he did the previous year. Which honestly, I should have expected. He was such a target monster that I felt like, even though it was a transition from Big Ben to Pickett or Trubisky, that he'd still be that short range target monster. And he still had the targets, but the efficiency was brutal. 0 touchdowns, which is just an anomaly as well. So, there was something just about the connection that he had with Big Ben. He would just pepper him with targets because he couldn't throw the ball more than 15 yards down the field. And he looked for him a lot on the goal line. They were throwing a ton on the goal line too. So I think he went from 7 touchdowns to 0. It's a massive dip. So, neither of those, my first 2 receivers, paid off. 2 at the bottom, Kyle Phillips, KJ Hamler, gave me nothing, basically. Hamler was hurt. Phillips was a non-factor. And the receivers that really gave me a boost and were an excellent value were Kirk, Um, there was such a big deal made about his contract, and he was overrated, and what were the Jaguars thinking? But man, he was phenomenal for where he was picked. But at the same time, he ended up being my number one. So if even though his stats were good and he overperformed what people expected, still not good enough to be your number one in a large field tournament. So um, I did get scoop up some good value. Like Pickens was very good, very solid. But again, he was a rookie. He had some down weeks. Did have some good touchdown upside, but where I got him, I was happy with it. And if he's your fourth, fifth, sixth receiver, then that's great. But he ended up being more like a number two on this team. So yeah, just not great. That's where the team that was the team's weak spot, certainly. So uh Kendrick Bourne, another guy I took expecting something similar to his previous year's output, but again, go back to the Joe Judge example, just absolutely abysmal to have him and Matt Patricia calling plays. It's just a recipe for disaster. So even though he was a late round pick, an 18 round pick, and I was hammering him in that round, thinking if he even stayed the same or just got slightly better, that's a great value. But he did not. He regressed, was in the doghouse. It was just a mess in New England last year. But Curtis Samuel, he's kind of like poor man's Debo Samuel. They found a way to utilize him, and he finally stayed healthy, and he had some good spike weeks with rushing touchdowns, and so he was a good late round snag. Had some really nice spike weeks. I think 3 or 4 spike weeks at least. But um, if you look down here, we're talking about week 17. Not a single guy on my receiving core hit 10 points. Couple zeros, a one, a two, couple threes, just absolutely brutal. So you're not going to win a tournament with that output, and that's a lot of the reason why the sharp people will say you got to go receiver. You got to go receiver early. Um, and I don't think that's set in stone. I think if you hit in the middle rounds, if you get some receivers, if you don't have 2 dead spots at receiver towards the end of your roster, if you instead of a Keenan Allen, take a Jalen Waddle who was falling, and I'll show the draft board in a minute and see where some of those guys went. But if you are able to nail one of those guys down, it's gonna completely swing things in your favor. So we go here to tight end Hiddle, who was also on my BBM3 final team. Um, Solid 10 points in the week 17 championship, but he really got me there with a couple weeks before the huge spike weeks, and he was just massive for me. Hunter Henry, another guy I was taking late all the time, thought he would be much better. I think he had 9 touchdowns the previous year, but nothing went right. Aside from Ramondre Stevenson, nothing really went right in New England. So that was another dud. Frymuth was solid. Like that's a good 3 tight end solid tight end core right there, but couldn't get it done in week 17. I do like the 3 tight ends though, even despite, I mean, Kittle was going in the 6th, so it wasn't like elite capital you were spending at tight end. He was more in that mid-tier range, which, I don't think he should be going that low. I think that was tremendous value for him, and he's the prototypical best ball player where he can spike just massive, and there's only a handful of guys that can do that. I honestly think it's him, Andrews, and Kelsey are the only ones that can really give you that elite spike weeks. And I guess Taysom Hill now all of a sudden. But yeah, Henry and Frymuth, the thinking there is they could alternate weeks. Maybe Henry has a 2 touchdown week, and the week that he's struggling, maybe Frymuth pitches in with a touchdown. So I do enjoy the 3 tight end builds. The only time I wouldn't go 3 tight ends is if I went with like let's say like a Kittle and Pitts, Kelsey and Goddard, maybe something like that. But I don't do that very often. Let's go round by round. Let's take a look at the draft board here. we'll take a little see if we can go round by round. Scroll back up to the top. So I was picking out of the 8 hole, and my BBM3 final team, I picked out of the 10 hole, this one out of the 8. So that's just a prime example of, you don't need a top 5 pick. You don't need a top 3 pick. Would you prefer that? Yeah, sure, because you're going to get access to a group of players that have just a massive elite ceiling, like a Jonathan Taylor 2 years ago, CMC. I mean, Justin Jefferson, Cups. The year the Rams won the Super Bowl, Cup was just ridiculous. He had almost like 400 points for a wide receiver. Just unreal. But that being said, you could still build a great team at the back half of the draft if you do things correctly. So Henry, I went with Henry 8th overall, and he was great. He was written off by a lot of people. He's old. He's getting close to the 30s, had a million carries, and people people would say, Henry's different. Henry's not built like other people. And then people would, pundits would shoot that down and say Henry is just like every other running back. You hit that age cliff, you hit that carry cliff, and it's over. It doesn't matter. He's not special in that regard. And I just completely disagree. I think he's one of the best all time. I think he's physically, body wise, he is unlike anybody we've seen in a long time. And honestly think he's got a couple great years left in him still. Even if he didn't get the volume, I think, you put him in the game in and around the goal line, and he could be like a Brandon Jacobs, like later in his career, just smashing people at the goal line. So I think he's always going to have touchdown upside as long as he's healthy. The only criticism is I took him over Stephon Diggs and CeeDee Lamb. So in hindsight, would I maybe do things differently, knowing how the receiving core turned out? Yeah, probably. But Henry was good, and as a first round pick, he was fine. The complaint comes in for me. The mistake comes in the next round. Like I love Swift. I was all in on Swift, and felt like a great value getting at the time. Felt like a great value getting him at 17. My BBM3 final team, I took him in the first round, so you can imagine that. But 17 overall, passing on guys like Tyreek Hill, AJ Brown, T. Higgins, Jalen Waddle. I just, that was rough. That was rough. Swing around to the third round, and Keenan Allen, like just how I described earlier. Good when he's good, very solid. He doesn't have the crazy, like the long touchdown. He's a more of a slow and steady, but he'll get you like 10 catches, 100 yards, maybe a touchdown. So he's steady in that regard, but when you can't be steady if you're not on the field. So he was a bust. Next swing around, 41 overall, Deontay. Not great. Definitely not worth a 4th round pick. And pretty similar to how my BBM3 final team went the first 4 rounds. Not great. I would say only one of those picks was good, but you can sometimes win it in the middle rounds, and that's what I did again. If you look at the first 4 picks compared to the next 4, just night and day. So you can turn it around. Kittle in the 5th, great value, 56. Be happy to take him there again. He's still sitting around that range, and I would hammer that. I have been hammering that. So him at 56, and then you come around to the 6th round, Jalen Hurts, 65 overall. Just ridiculous value. Some of those quarterbacks were going so late last year. Hurts, Burrow, Mahomes, like just such amazing value. And you're never going to see him in that range again. The lowest you'll see him dip is maybe beginning of the 3rd. I've seen it a handful of times, but mostly 2nd round pick. So just getting him there and just so elite at that spot. That was he was the catalyst to turn this team around. And then seventh round Christian Kirk, he was just fantastic. He meshed so well with Lawrence, Doug Peterson. It's a great football mind. Bonehead moved to tank. We all know that, but he is a good football guy, and he knew how to utilize Kirk. And I think that was the biggest downfall of Kyler Murray last year and before he got hurt was the absence of Christian Kirk. Super underappreciated, and I can remember at least 5-6 times where Kirk got free down the field and caught a long bomb from Murray, 40, 50, 60 yards. So they missed that dynamic to the offense, and he brought that dynamic to Jacksonville. So as a seventh round pick, he was phenomenal. If I had hit on a couple of my earlier receivers, that would have been a smash, and I think it would have had a chance to win the tournament. Dameon Pierce in the 8th round, 89 overall. This was, I believe this draft was fairly early in the offseason. It wasn't at the very beginning because you can see Pierce at 89, he had started to get steamed up. You could get him in the 12th, 13th, if I remember correctly, at the very beginning of the offseason. And there started to be some good camp reports. And Pierce started to get steamed up. I believe they had a veteran who was released as well. So he started to get steamed up, but he was still in a good range there that it was still somewhat of a value. And he was good. He was good for 95% of the year. He was fantastic. So no complaints about that pick right there. But on the wraparound, this is where I could critique myself again. Singletary, he's fine. He was solid. He's always seems to win. He always seemed to win out that job in Buffalo, regardless of who they brought in as the number 2. Even with the rookie James Cook, who actually went right before him there, he still managed to carve out a solid season. And I'd have to look it up, but I believe he was still in the top 20, top 25. So he was like an RB2 range. But if you look 2 picks later, Tyler Lockett, I mean, I was hammering Lockett, and for whatever reason, I didn't take him here. Maybe I figured, I got too much Lockett. I got to balance it out a bit. But yeah, if you switch Lockett and Singletary there, that's going to make all the difference in the world. That receiving core all of a sudden looks much better. So, and I already had a lot of stability at running back. I already had Dameon Pierce, DeAndre Swift, Derrick Henry, so I could have waited. I could have left that off for a while. So definitely a mistake there. No doubt about it. I did redeem myself on the wrap back around. Pickens at 113. He was very good, very solid, and it's easy to say in hindsight. Like I look at the board then and Pickens 113, but Garrett Wilson 116. Like, you're talking about Garrett Wilson, who had that first round draft capital, and there shouldn't have been a reason why I was taking Pickens over Wilson there, but maybe a little fear over the quarterback. I didn't love Zach Wilson after seeing what I saw the year before, but Pickens, solid pick there, and definitely helped out and made the wide receiver core more balanced. I'll wrap around to the next pick here, 128, Brian Robinson. So I go running back again. Robinson was fine. I mean, he got shot later in the offseason and missed time. No one's going to be able to predict that. And once he settled in and got back into a rhythm, he was good. He was very solid, very productive towards the second half of the year. Nothing special, but he was getting a ton of touches, and there wasn't much competition for him there in the early downs. So, again, not a bad pick. He was a contributor. but that should have been a receiver there. Just an upside play, a swing on a guy with upside. You have to do that in these kind of drafts. So we wrap back around to 137. Fryermuth. Good value for Fryermuth. I mean, 12th round. I think he's going now in the 8th. So definitely a jump up for him. Very solid, very good player. But again, you get Kittle. Do you really need to go tight end there? Can you grab two later and go for an upside wide receiver? Christian Watson, I see in the wraparound there in the next round, somebody like that would have just been massive. So, and the next pick is painful. Then KJ Hamler just again got hurt. A lot of talk, preseason talk. Hamler's back, and seeing the way the Broncos offense turned out, it probably wouldn't have done much anyways. It was a disaster. It was on par with the Patriots as far as just a dumpster fire of an offense. That was brutal to watch, and they had about 6 primetime games, so not great there. And this is what you do though. This is hindsight, and when you look at the board and you say, "Oh my God, this guy went here. I could have had him." You're going to do that a lot. And that's why sometimes just loading up on the rookies, taking a chance on 4 or 5 rookie wide receivers, if you weren't hitting wide receiver early in the draft, there's a good chance one of them is going to pop. There's a very good chance. So that's something I've definitely been doing this year, as opposed to dipping into, like if I have a Kittle, I'm not going with a second elite tight end. I'm trying to just nail down those upside rookie wide receivers. And an example of that was on my BBM 3 final team. I did get Hawkinson, but he was like a 10th round pick, and with elite upside. So it was like I did have Kittle and Hawkinson, and I did spend a 6th and a 10 on them, but to me they had elite ceilings, and Hawkinson had as elite of a ceiling as any rookie did for the most part. I mean, maybe outside of Garrett Wilson, but I think go by overall points at the end of the year, they were pretty close. So Fryermuth falls into that category of more like a solid guy who's could get you 700 yards and 5 or 6 touchdowns, but does he have 1,000-yard upside? Does he have 35-point week upside? No, I don't think so. So I would say that's a mistake. Hamler was just a 0. Hunter Henry, as I touched on, Patriots offense was abysmal. You see Jameson Williams go after him, and I did have a bunch of Jameson Williams, but I mean, the guy, he came back later than a lot of people expected, had 1 long touchdown catch, and that was it. So he not like he was going to help you much. My next pick was one of the better picks of the draft, Daniel Jones, as I touched on. 15th round, you're taking a swing on an upside quarterback with rushing potential, and that's what I want to do again this year. I want to target guys who can run a little bit, who are going late. A lot of people are out on Kyler, and that's fine. I there's always those notions. No, they're going to shut him down for the year. That almost never happens. If a guy's healthy enough to play in the NFL, they put him out there. And I don't think benching a guy for the year does you any long-term benefit. You get a new coach in there. You want to see what the guy's got. If he's good enough to put him out there, then they'll put him out there. So Kyler is a guy that I do like with the rushing upside that's going a little bit later in these drafts, getting pushed down. So He would be my Daniel Jones of this year. A couple other guys that I'm considering late like that too. But if I can, I want to get I want to get a two QB build. Um, and in saying that, I do have some teams with. I think I have two teams with four quarterbacks, which I don't love doing, and most people wouldn't recommend. But I think there are scenarios where it can be feasible because on those teams I went six wide receivers early, and I got some mid-round running backs that I think are good value. So I think you don't necessarily have to stick to two QBs, but if you can get two good ones, you get 16 other spots to fill out that you don't have to worry about QB. So that can be huge. So I'll just run down these last three picks real quick. Bourne, as I said, 16th round, gave me nothing for the most part. Very disappointing. And I'm a Patriots fan, so seeing Bourne have such a regression was sad, honestly. Tough to watch. Curtis Samuel in the 17th home run pick. Think, he had something like close to 10 touchdowns between receiving and rushing, and was able to stay healthy. So that's a guy you look at and you say, he has a lot of tools, and maybe he was hurt the year before, but he has a good ceiling. Someone I'm looking at this year like that is a Renfro. A lot of volume. If he gets volume, especially with Jimmy G, if he's healthy enough to play, it's a guy who would just pepper him underneath with targets, I think, and um, he'll have maybe similar results that he got 2 years ago as opposed to last year. He was just banged up, and the Rays were kind of a mess overall. Last round, Kyle Phillips, dud, absolute dud. And you go four picks down, you see a prime example of that. Tyquan Thornton. Was he great? No. Came in early in the season, got hurt, but guess what? He spiked in week 17. He had a touchdown. He was in the winning lineup, Pat Kareem's winning lineup, and those are the guys you want to take shots on because you never know. Like the veterans seem safe at during draft season. They seem like the safe bet, but they wear down so fast. They wear down, and especially if they're older, like just looking here in the 16th round, like a Sammy Watkins. He made the team, and it's like, oh, Watkins is going to start. He's going to have a role, and you get 4 or 5 weeks in, and the guy's just dust. He's not even worthy of being on a roster, and they just move on. They said, you know what, let's see what we got with the young guys. So that's the mindset you got to have a lot of times. So hope you guys enjoyed that breakdown. I am going to hopefully my next video will be me doing a BBM3 draft. But I just kind of wanted to show my receipts from last year and the things I did right, things I did wrong. And I'm always going to try and have that transparency. And I think that's what's missing a lot from the best ball space. So thank you guys for tuning in, and I will talk to you soon. Take it easy, DJ Nation.